It's okay, Femi. What is your fifth and final tip, please? Right, okay, Femi. What is your fifth and final tip?
So the last one, and I'm not ashamed to say that I was really excited the other night when I was listening to your podcast and I heard Joe Morgan saying the exact same thing. So I'm afraid we are sharing a tip, but it is answers on real time and explain to kids how to use them. Answers in real time, I should say. So this is moving away from the way that I was taught maths, right? When the teacher would go up the front, they'd do two examples. They then say, right guys, exercise 14B. And then they'd sit down and they'd mark books. And we'd all work our way on the exercise. And at the end, she'd say, 7 minutes to go. Right, okay, let's go through the answers. Question 1 is 5 root 3. Yes, I got that right. Question 2 is 10 root 3. Oh, yes, yeah. Question 3 is 5 root 3 plus 4. Oh, no. And then the next 6 are all wrong. And you cross. And it's just, right, okay, off you go, guys, have a nice lunch. I mean, that is just ridiculous. And then I went to do my A-levels and at a different school, and we were very much encouraged there to use the textbook and check our answers in real time. So we'd work through an exercise, and we would mark it ourselves, and then we'd know whether we were right or wrong. So we knew we were making progress. We knew when we needed to ask the teacher for help, because we got an answer of 16.2, but the book says 38.6. We knew when we were equipped to help somebody else, because Craig's got it right and I've got it wrong, so Craig can have some help. And it was just so obvious and so much more powerful that when I started teaching myself, I just thought, I've got to give the pupils answers as well as the questions, and then they can check their work in real time, and I as a teacher can circulate the room and only deal with problems rather than having to go over and tick someone's work. Yeah, that's right. And also, you don't get the classic thing of the boy who gets them all wrong and then leaves with his head down. Oh, I'm no good at maths. I knew I wasn't. You get rid of that, because then you get to find out how he's doing as we go. So it's a really simple tip, but I use it pretty much all the time. There are some times when you can't use it, right? So things like negative numbers with year 7, they might be doing -2, -5, and the answer's -7. You can't have the answer on the bottom because you've got no idea whether that kid has just written down the answer from the bottom. So there are other ways of doing that. But with things like trigonometry or the quadratic formula or solving equations, a complicated equation where the answer is x is 6 and you've got to have lots of lines of working, get them marking their own work. It's just so obvious. And it blows my mind the number of teachers who still revert back to this kind of like answers at the end, kind of, or I'll take your books in the market. So answers in real time.
I love it. Right, okay. So 3 questions on this, Femi, for you. So the first one is the obvious objection to this, which is some kids are just going to use that as an excuse to not do work and just kind of copy stuff down. How do you counteract that?
My answer to that would be similar to what I said to you earlier, really, which is people like having success. So why is it that people go to escape rooms and will spend hours in escape rooms, and they could easily get their phones out and Google the answers to all the escape rooms, but they don't, because they want to work it out for themselves. Children are no different to that. They on the whole, and I'm talking like some quite tough inner city schools that I've worked in where I've done this, won't do that if they feel they are equipped with the understanding to do it themselves. You often see that happening when kids just don't get it. And so they just think, oh, flipping it, well, I don't know, 18, 24, there you go, I've done it, yeah, tick, got them all right, sir. They won't do that if they've been taught well, it's been explained to them clearly, they've had a couple of check questions to do before they went onto the sheet, where they got the chance to find out if they were right without the answers, and they got those right, and they're happy with the method. They then will work without cheating. In my experience, I'm talking about low ability or low prior attaining kids in tough areas will do this if the environment is created for them. The other thing I'll say about it, actually, is it really helps what I call the 7 silent students, and that is roughly, I say, in every class of 30. There are about 7 students, I've got no research for this is just kind of my estimation, who, unless they're directly spoken to and challenged, spoken to, will say nothing at all. They're not mute, they're not kind of nothing wrong with them, they're quite vocal at home with their mates, but in a lesson they just don't like to say too much. And it really helps them as well, because they often get left behind, because the bigger personalities will dominate with behaviour or with being really bright or better than the others in the class, and the teacher goes to them first, and these guys just want to get on. But they often get things wrong and just very quietly have found ways of kind of masking that without ever having to speak to the teacher. Whereas if they've got the answers as well, they can go through it and know whether they're getting it right or wrong. So I think it really helps them.
Okay, so follow-up question number 2. I think this works quite easily in terms of sixth form or A-level classes, because perhaps they're working from textbooks and so on, and they can flick to the back or whatever it is. If you've got a year 7, 8 or 9 class and you're maybe doing it from a worksheet or something, or questions on the board, how practically do you give access to the answers?
So normally if I'm working on a worksheet, they are on the back. So it's not really easy just to flick your eyes down to the bottom and you can see, well, the answer's 5. So there you go. They would be on the back. And I would be very much circulating the room. And as well as I am checking the maths and making sure that people are adding 2 to both sides and dividing by blah, 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 I'm also checking that people are using the exercise in the right way. So I will go and stand behind kids as they work and just watch them. Yeah, okay, I can see. And you can see the difference between a kid who is solving equations and checking if they're right and a kid who is making sure they've checked the answer first and then using that and working backwards. So just by circulating and by creating that culture of course we wouldn't do that, again, it comes down to classroom culture.
Okay.
But I would say, I get what you're saying about year 7 and year 8, but normally I find, in my experience anyway, the work we're doing in secondary school has at least got some steps to it. So not that much of what I do in year 7 upwards is just one step. So I don't know. Find 10% of 42. Well, the answer's 4.2. There's no working out that's really needed there. A kid could just write down 42. Quite quickly, even with low ability kids, I'm getting onto something that requires some kind of work. So it might be find 15% of 42. Right, we've got to write down 10% is 4.2. 5% is 2.1. 15, I want to see all that written down before you're turning the sheet over and checking your answer. And I would have gone through all that on the board before I let loose on the sheet.
Well, my final question on this, Femi, kind of comes back to that, because I think that there's quite a few areas of mathematics, particularly the fundamentals, where if you have the answer, you kind of have everything. So we'll go back to your negative numbers one before. So your negative number operations, it's if the answer's there, it's hard to what working do you want the kid to put for negative 5 take away 2 or whatever. Even something like expanding a single bracket. Expanding a single bracket. If you see the answer there, it's kind of done and dusted. Rounding. There's a whole host of maths where if you have the answer, is kind of everything. So what do you do with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so things like that, I think you still can use the same approach. And I found it really interesting actually on your pod when Jo Morgan said, very honestly, she said, there may be a few pupils in my class who are sneakily using the answers to some extent to gain an advantage, but I'm still gaining a lot more than I'm losing if they weren't there. And the second thing I'd say to that is also, at least once a week in my department and other departments I've worked in, we are taking all of that away, and they do a mini assessment under test conditions on all the work we've done recently. So over time, not that we ever would explicitly say this, but they do realise that what we're doing in the practice phase of lessons, we're practicing, we're training, if you like. So there's no point going back to the rugby analogy, I keep talking about rugby, of in our training session, we throw the ball forward because it's easier and we can score lots of tries doing that. But then on Saturday when we play, the referee actually stops us doing that, and then we can't do it anymore. So we're going to struggle on Saturday, aren't we? Because we can't do that. So they do realise that this is just kind of practice for my weekly assessment, for my end of term test, for my GCSE, and I honestly don't think if you came to one of my lessons and spoke to even some of the year 7s and 8s and lower ability and said to them, just out of interest, do you use the answers to cheat, or do you use them to actually check if you're right? I think they would say to you, no, Mr. Barton, I use them because I want to know if it's right or not. So I do 5, and I check them, and then I either work out that I've gone wrong, or I put my hand up, and he comes round, and then he checks. Because it's actually quite interesting that something that I have had from non-maths observers that come in is them not recognising that this can be done until they see it done. So I think it definitely can be done if they realise that it's practice. You're gaining nothing from doing this.
That's brilliant.